Miami doesn't flood because of hurricanes anymore. These days, it floods on sunny days with clear skies overhead. Water rises straight up through the streets. Not over a wall, not from a storm, just from the ground itself. The city sits on porous limestone. During high tides, seawater pushes up through the rock, faster than any seawall could stop it. So, Miami is doing something almost no American city has attempted: redesigning its roads, its drainage, its neighborhoods. Before the flooding becomes permanent. Not after the next hurricane. Before it. So how exactly do you protect a city built on rock that lets the ocean pass straight through it? This isn't one project. It's a patchwork of billion-dollar plans, all racing the same clock. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a $2.7 billion plan to protect Miami-Dade from storm surge, elevating the most vulnerable homes, flood-proofing hospitals and fire stations, and building targeted flood walls in the most exposed spots. Separately, the city of Miami has its own stormwater master plan, estimated at $3.8 to $5.4 billion, covering hundreds of miles of new drainage, thousands of wells to fight saltwater intrusion, and dozens of new pump stations. Miami Beach, a separate city on a barrier island, has been running its own resilience program for over a decade. Combined, these efforts add up to well over $10 billion, with some estimates running considerably higher, across a region that's home to millions of people and some of the most valuable coastal real estate in the entire country. If this fails, it's not a slow decline. It's neighborhoods becoming uninsurable, then unlivable. To understand why Miami is doing this now, we need to understand what makes it different from almost every other coastal city. Most cities dealing with rising seas can build a wall and hold the water back. Miami can't. The ground underneath it is limestone, a rock so porous it behaves almost like a sponge. When the tide rises, water doesn't just push against the coastline. It seeps directly up through the bedrock, resurfacing blocks away from the water in streets that look nowhere near the ocean. For decades, the city's response was simple: pumps. Miami Beach alone has poured more than $500 million into a decade-long program installing dozens of pumps and raising roads across the island. Roughly what it cost to build an entire NFL stadium, spent just to keep the streets dry. But pumps need electricity, and the storms that cause the worst flooding are the same storms that knock out power. During Hurricane Irma, officials publicly acknowledged the pump system wasn't designed for a storm like that. Only for routine rain and high tides, not major surge. On the one day the city needed its pumps the most, they were exactly as useful as a wall with no gate. King tides made the same point without a hurricane. High tide flooding events in parts of Miami Beach jumped roughly 400% in under a decade. Not because of any single storm, but because the baseline sea level itself had risen enough to overwhelm a drainage system built for a different era. Meanwhile, decades of pulling groundwater out of the ground for drinking water opened another door. Salt water has been quietly seeping into the freshwater aquifer that the entire region depends on. Here's the challenge. You can't fix a porous foundation with a wall. The Army Corps' first attempt tried anyway. A plan for a flood wall running up to 20 feet high along parts of the Miami waterfront, cutting through Brickell, the city's financial district. The public reaction was immediate. Residents and local officials said the wall would block waterfront access, damage property values, and turn the city's most iconic bay views into a concrete barrier. Miami-Dade County rejected the plan outright. That single rejection cost the project years. The Army Corps agreed to spend millions more and take 4 additional years just to study nature-based alternatives instead. Mangroves, reefs, engineered islands, approaches the Corps admitted it had little experience measuring. Then there's the money problem underneath the money problem. Federal projects like the Army Corps plan require a cost-benefit ratio. The value of what's protected has to outweigh the cost of protecting it. That math tends to favor wealthy, high-value neighborhoods, leaving lower-income areas, often the most flood-prone, competing for a smaller share of protection. And every layer of this has to be coordinated with projects already underway nearby, including one of the largest ecological restoration efforts in American history, the Everglades Restoration Program, which shares the same water systems and can't be treated as a separate problem. Every solution engineers proposed ran into the same wall. You can't build a wall against water that's coming from underneath you. Since a single wall can't solve a problem coming up through the ground, engineers are building several defenses at once, layered on top of each other. At the base layer, thousands of new drainage wells, designed to pull stormwater underground and inject it deep below the freshwater aquifer, reducing both flooding and the saltwater creeping into the water supply. Above that, roads. In the lowest-lying neighborhoods, the plan isn't to build walls around homes, it's to physically raise the streets themselves, so gravity does the work pumps used to do, draining water away instead of pooling it. Where flood walls are still necessary, they're being scaled back and reshaped, shorter, positioned to protect specific critical buildings like hospitals and fire stations, rather than sealing off entire neighborhoods from the water. And instead of relying purely on concrete, engineers are testing living shorelines, mangroves, and reef structures that absorb wave energy naturally, buying time and reducing how much hard infrastructure the region needs to build. The bet isn't that any single piece stops the water. It's that enough layers stacked together slow it down long enough for the region to adapt. No single piece of this plan was ever meant to work alone. The wells, the raised roads, the scaled-back walls, and the living shorelines only add up to real protection if all of them get built, and get built roughly on schedule. Every one of these plans is racing a timeline that keeps getting worse. The Army Corps' preliminary design phase doesn't even start until 2026, with construction stretching out to 2034, over a decade after the original study began, and well after some neighborhoods are already flooding on a routine basis. Funding remains split across federal, state, and local budgets, each with its own approval process and no guarantee all three keep paying their share for the next decade. A single budget fight at any level of government can stall a piece of the plan the other pieces were quietly depending on. And there's a deeper tension nobody has resolved. Protecting Miami's most valuable real estate is often where the cost-benefit math works best, which means the neighborhoods with the least money to defend themselves may end up protected last, if at all. The ocean doesn't wait for budget approvals. If these plans succeed, Miami becomes something the world hasn't really seen before. A major coastal city that engineered its way into staying, instead of slowly losing ground to rising seas the way so many low-lying cities eventually do. If they don't, the flooding doesn't stay occasional. It becomes the new baseline, and the cost shifts from construction budgets to falling property values and rising insurance premiums that eventually price people out entirely. Miami isn't just building seawalls and pump stations. It's testing whether a modern American city can outbuild an ocean that doesn't even need to go over anything. It just needs to come up through the ground. The next decade will decide whether that bet pays off, or whether Miami becomes the first major warning sign for every other low-lying coastal city watching closely from the sidelines.